At the dealership, my father shoved the finance form into my hand and hissed through clenched teeth. "Just sign it. It's for your brother." The air inside the showroom was thick with that sterile mix of fresh leather and floor polish, and I could feel every pair of eyes around me waiting for my pen to touch the paper. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as if mocking me, and my brother stood just a few steps back, arms crossed, face smug and expectant, already imagining himself behind the wheel of the glossy black SUV parked outside. I glanced down at the paper, the numbers swimming before my eyes, the total loan amount written in bold. A debt that wasn't mine, yet somehow I was supposed to shoulder it without question. My father's hand pressed harder against mine, forcing the pen closer, his jaw tight with that familiar command that had governed my whole life. Do it for family, don't embarrass us, don't resist. I felt my chest tighten, not just from the pressure of the moment, but from the years that led up to this one. Years of being the convenient daughter, the fallback, the one who could be relied on to fix their messes. And yet something in me shifted as I stared at that blank signature line. A quiet, burning thought that this might be the very moment where everything would change. My father's voice dropped lower, sharp as a blade. "Do you want your brother walking out of here humiliated? Do you want this family's name dragged through the dirt?" His words weren't new to me. They were the same phrases he'd rehearsed since I was old enough to understand shame. "Family comes first, you owe us this, don't be selfish." I stood there clutching the pen, heat rising in my throat, watching the salesman hover politely nearby, his eyes darting between us like he knew exactly what was happening, but pretended it was just business. My brother didn't even bother hiding his smirk. He tapped his phone, leaned against the counter, and muttered, "Hurry up already. Don't make this a scene." The arrogance in his tone was unbearable, but what hit me harder was the memory it triggered. The way he had always gotten what he wanted. The way I had always been the one paying for it. I thought about the tuition bills in my name because he needed to try out of state for college, only to drop out a semester later. I thought about the credit card I'd let him use just for emergencies that came back maxed out with bar tabs and luxury sneakers. And I thought about the way my parents smoothed it over every single time, brushing off my exhaustion and debt with the same mantra, "You're stronger, you can handle it. He needs you." As the memories crashed over me, my grip on the pen loosened, my stomach tightening like I was about to step into traffic. I could hear my pulse in my ears, and it was then, in that thick silence between my father's glare and my brother's sneer, that I realized what this moment really was. Not just about a car loan, not just about one signature, but about every single time I'd been asked to erase myself for them. I didn't sign. Not yet. I let the silence stretch until it turned into something uncomfortable, until even the salesman cleared his throat and shuffled the papers like he was trying to cover up the tension hanging in the air. My father's fingers twitched against the edge of the desk, impatience flickering in his eyes. And for once I didn't fold right away. Instead, I let my mind wander backward, piecing together all the ways I'd been groomed for this exact moment. Growing up, my brother was the golden child. Spoiled, adored, forgiven before he even had a chance to apologize. If he wanted a new bike, he got it. If he wanted to quit piano lessons after 2 weeks, no one blinked. If he brought home a report card with C's and D's, my parents sighed but laughed it off as boys being boys. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one. The one who got straight A's because anything less brought lectures about discipline and respect. I was the one who washed dishes, folded laundry, and soothed my mother's temper while they coddled my brother like a fragile prize. By the time I was 16, it was already expected that I would sacrifice. When my brother wrecked his first car, I gave up my savings from a part-time job to cover the deductible so he could keep driving to football practice. When he failed out of college, I co-signed the lease on his apartment, because, according to my father, he just needs a little stability. Each time I told myself it would be the last. Each time I promised myself I would draw a line, and yet each time I crumbled under their guilt and manipulation. And here I was again, at 29 years old, standing under the bright lights of a dealership while my father shoved papers into my hand, repeating the same script he had always used. "Do it for your brother. Don't embarrass us, just sign." I glanced at my brother again, his smug grin carved across his face as he scrolled through Instagram like the SUV was already his. That grin was what pushed me over the edge. It was no longer about being the dutiful daughter or protecting the family name. It was about survival. Mine. And for the first time in my life, I felt a crack of steel in my spine as I thought, what if I didn't sign? What if I finally walked away? The thought scared me, but it also thrilled me in a way I couldn't ignore. My father's stare bore into me. That same unspoken command he had used to control me my entire life. But something inside me had shifted, like a door slamming shut. I traced the numbers on the finance form with my eyes. $42,736 in bold letters, a 6-year loan with my name at the top, and not a trace of my brother's responsibility anywhere. He was already laughing at a meme on his phone, not even pretending to acknowledge the weight of what was being asked of me. I remembered the night he borrowed my credit card for gas and drained it at a casino in under 2 hours. I remembered how I spent 3 years fixing my credit, juggling bills and late fees while my parents told me to be patient, to understand his struggles. And I remembered the sick feeling of shame when collectors called me at work, while he strutted into family dinners with new sneakers and a fresh haircut. I gripped the pen tighter, not to sign, but to stop my hand from shaking. My father leaned closer, his breath hot with anger, whispering, "You will not embarrass this family today. We raised you better than this." And in that moment, I thought of all the times family had meant erasing myself so that my brother could shine. I thought of the endless nights I lay awake calculating how to pay off someone else's mistakes. My chest burned with a mix of rage and clarity. I placed the pen flat on the counter, looked my father in the eye, and said in the calmest voice I could muster, "If this is for him, then he can sign it. I'm done being the one you use." The salesman froze, his polite smile faltering, my father's face turning red with a fury I had seen before, and my brother finally looking up from his phone, caught off guard for once in his life. And in that instant, I knew I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. But I also knew I had finally chosen myself. My father's jaw clenched so tight I could hear his teeth grind, his hand twitching like he wanted to snatch the papers back and shove them at me again, but I didn't flinch. For the first time in years, I didn't fold under his glare. My brother finally straightened, annoyed, his voice cutting through the thick silence. "What's your problem? Just sign it. You've always handled things before. Why are you acting brand new?" His words dripped with entitlement, like I was the unreasonable one for not chaining myself to his debts again. The salesman gave an awkward cough, glancing at the clock on the wall, probably wishing he could vanish into the polished floor tiles. My mother wasn't there, but I could already hear her voice in my head, soft and poisonous. "Don't fight with your brother. You're the oldest, you should know better. If you cared about us, you'd do this one thing." The chorus of guilt they had drilled into me since childhood. My pulse hammered, but I kept my voice even. "No, I'm not putting my name on this. If he wants the car, he can take the loan. If he can't, then maybe he doesn't need it." My father slammed his palm on the desk so hard the pen rolled to the edge. "Do you have any idea what people will say when they find out you refuse to help your own blood?" I met his eyes and said, "Let them talk." The words surprised me as much as they shocked him, but they came out steady, final. My brother scoffed, muttered, "Unbelievable," and shoved the chair back, storming out of the showroom with a string of curses. My father stood frozen, his face twisted with rage, like he couldn't comprehend that his control over me had cracked wide open in front of a stranger. The salesman quietly slid the papers back into the folder, pretending not to have witnessed a decades-long family dynamic explode across his desk. And me? I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Terrifying, shaky, but real. Like stepping into the sun after living underground too long. I wasn't sure what would come next, but I knew this. I had just taken the first step toward ending a lifetime of being their safety net, and there was no turning back. I opened my banking app and stared at the numbers that had taken me years to stabilize, each dollar a reminder of sleepless nights and sacrifices that no one in my family had ever acknowledged. I wasn't about to let them destroy it again. My father kept calling, his name lighting up my screen over and over, then switching to unknown numbers when I blocked him, his persistence like a shadow that refused to let me breathe. My brother, on the other hand, started blasting social media, with vague posts about ungrateful people and family betrayers, and mutual relatives immediately chimed in with sympathy for him, none of them knowing the truth or even caring to ask. I sat in that car for nearly an hour, the air conditioner humming, my mind racing through years of being their safety net, and something inside me hardened. I opened my email again, but this time it wasn't to the dealership manager. It was To my lawyer, a woman I'd once consulted when my brother's unpaid debts almost got me sued. I typed, "Urgent. Need to confirm steps for blocking fraudulent credit applications in my name. Possible family pressure involved. Can we talk today?" I hit send and felt a surge of relief. For once, I wasn't reacting like their scapegoat. I was building a wall, brick by brick. By the time I started my engine and pulled out of that dealership lot, I knew there was no going back. This wasn't just about a car or even a loan. It was about rewriting every rule they had forced on me since childhood, and they were about to find out what it felt like when I stopped playing my part in their script. That evening, my apartment felt like both a sanctuary and a battlefield. My phone buzzed nonstop. Group chats exploding with accusations. Voice messages from my mother laced with tears and guilt. My father's thunderous threats about cutting me off, as if I hadn't already been living on my own for years. My brother even left me a voicemail slurring with rage, calling me selfish, a traitor, promising everyone would see the truth about me. But the truth was already on my side. And I had receipts. I pulled out an old folder I kept buried. In the back of my closet, thick with printouts of bills, bank statements, copies of texts where my brother promised to pay me back next week that never came. There was the $200 tuition payment I covered so he could re-enroll, the $3,400 credit card debt I paid down after he maxed mine, even the $2,700 for the emergency dental surgery that turned out to be a weekend in Miami. I laid them across my dining table, every piece of evidence of how my life had been hijacked for his convenience. Then, I did something I had never done before. I scanned them all, created a drive folder, and titled it, "For the Record." My lawyer responded within the hour, crisp and professional. "We'll set a fraud alert on your credit immediately. Also, given the history, we can draft a cease and desist letter to your family regarding any financial use of your name." Reading that line made me exhale a breath I didn't know I'd been holding for decades. A cease and desist. Legal proof that I was no longer theirs to drain. Still, the retaliation was swift. By morning, my aunt had posted a passive-aggressive Facebook status about children who forget where they came from, and cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were messaging me that I had broken Dad's heart. My father finally sent one text, blunt and cold. "Don't come to this house again. You're not welcome until you fix this." I stared at it, waiting for the familiar pang of guilt, but it didn't come. Instead, there was only a quiet certainty. I wasn't the one who needed to fix anything. They were, and for once, I wasn't going to bleed myself dry to make it easier for them. I locked my phone, pushed the stack of evidence into a neat pile, and whispered out loud to the empty room, "This time, I'm not backing down." The days that followed were like walking through fire, but for the first time, I wasn't the one getting burned. I was the one holding the match. My father's calls turned into icy silence, which I knew was his way of punishing me, but it only confirmed how conditional his love had always been. My mother tried a different angle, sending me long, weepy emails about how families survive only when daughters sacrifice, attaching old photos of me holding my brother's hand at school events, like nostalgia could erase debt collectors and forged signatures. My brother, meanwhile, escalated. He tried to apply for another loan, this time using a variation of my name. But the fraud alert I had set up flagged it instantly. I received the notification before he even realized his attempt had been blocked. My lawyer called me the next morning. "They tried to use your identity. We've got proof now. We can file charges if you want." Her calm voice was the sound of a door opening into a world I'd never allowed myself to imagine, one where I wasn't their captive. And yet, part of me hesitated, because filing charges meant tearing away the last thin thread holding the illusion of family together. But that hesitation shrank fast when I checked my mailbox and found a notice from a collection agency addressed to me for a furniture rental contract I never signed. My brother's handwriting was sloppy, but unmistakable, his signature barely altered. That was the final straw. I sat at my kitchen table, the notice in one hand and my lawyer's number on speed dial in the other, and realized there was no saving what was already broken. That evening, I sent everything, the scanned bills, the collection notice, screenshots of texts, to my lawyer with the subject line, "Proceed." Within 48 hours, she had drafted the cease and desist letter and filed a police report for attempted identity fraud. For once, the law was on my side. not theirs. And as word spread through the family grapevine, the tone shifted. Suddenly my phone filled with messages not of guilt, but of outrage. How could you involve the police? He's your brother. You'll regret this when Dad's gone. But beneath the noise, I felt only strength. I wasn't scared of their judgment anymore. I was building something stronger than approval. Boundaries, backed by law. And when I lay in bed that night, phone buzzing unanswered on the nightstand, I realized I wasn't afraid of being alone. What terrified me more was the thought of still living as their scapegoat at 40, 50, 60 years old. And that nightmare had just ended. The storm truly broke when the cease and desist letter landed in my parents' mailbox. I didn't see you. Their faces when they opened it. But I can imagine the fury, the disbelief, the way my father's hands must have trembled with rage holding a piece of paper that proved his daughter had finally put the law between them. The first explosion came in the form of a group phone call, everyone on speaker, their voices layered over each other. My father shouting that I had disgraced him, my mother crying that she couldn't show her face at church, my brother cursing and threatening to fix this himself if I didn't back down. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply said, "The next attempt to use my name goes to court. This conversation is over." And I hung up. The silence afterward was like music. Then came the smear campaign. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years-filled social media with thinly veiled posts about selfish daughters and children who turn against family. Old friends messaged me, confused, asking if it was true I had abandoned my brother in his time of need. For the first time in my life, I didn't defend myself. I let the posts hang there, let the whispers grow, because I knew the receipts were mine, the truth was mine, and their noise could no longer chain me. Meanwhile, my brother's world began to unravel. The dealership canceled the SUV purchase after the failed loan. The furniture rental company flagged his account for fraud. And then, the police called him in for questioning. I heard through. A cousin that he had stormed into my parents' house, screaming that I had ruined his life. But the truth was, he had ruined it himself. I had just stopped cushioning the fall. For me, the changes were quiet, but profound. Nights where I used to lie awake calculating bills, I now slept with ease. Weekends I once spent bailing him out, I now filled with things that nourished me. Yoga, coffee with real friends, long walks where no one demanded I fix their mistakes. And little by little, I stopped waiting for the phone to buzz with another crisis. The last message I received from my father came 3 weeks later. It was short, almost cold. "You are no longer part of this family." I read it once, twice, and then deleted it. Because in my heart, I knew the truth. Family isn't built on exploitation, on endless sacrifice for someone else's mistakes. Family is built on respect. And if they couldn't give me that, then they were right. I wasn't part of theirs anymore. That was the day I stopped mourning the family I wished I had and started living for the life I was finally free to create. 2 months passed before the full weight of what I had done truly showed itself, and by then I was no longer shaking every time my phone lit up. Word came slowly, through whispers, through cousins who still stalked my social media even though we hadn't spoken in years. My brother had lost his job at the car parts warehouse after his manager received a quiet call from investigators about the fraud complaints piling up. The police had decided not to pursue jail time. He took a plea deal instead, probation, community service, and a mountain of debt that was now undeniably his. For the first time in his life, he had to stand in front of a judge without me there to soften the blow. And my father, his pride took the hit harder than anything. He stopped showing up at his weekly poker nights, stopped bragging at church about his perfect children because the story couldn't be controlled anymore. Everyone knew that the golden son had fallen, and the scapegoat daughter had been the one to finally pull the mask off. At first, I thought the isolation would break me. I thought I would crumble without their calls, even the toxic ones. But the strangest thing happened. My world got bigger instead of smaller. Friends who had watched from the sidelines reached out to say they admired me. Coworkers who had only known pieces of my story began inviting me out for dinners, saying, "I don't know how you stayed so strong all these years." And quietly, almost secretly, my aunt on my mother's side sent me a message late one night. "I'm proud of you. I wish I'd had the courage to do what you did." It wasn't much, but it cracked open the lie my parents had tried to sell me my whole life, that I was alone. That without them, I was nothing. One Saturday, I drove past the dealership, the same gleaming showroom where my father had shoved that contract into my hand. The SUV my brother had wanted so badly wasn't there anymore, just a row of other shiny models, none of them mine to carry. I parked for a moment, just to sit in the same lot where everything had changed, and I realized that I didn't feel dread anymore. I felt gratitude. Gratitude for the humiliation, for the pressure, because it had forced me into a choice I might never have made otherwise. It had forced me to finally say no. At home, I kept the folder of receipts in its place, not because I needed proof anymore, but because it was a reminder, a record of who I used to be and the line I had finally drawn. And each day after, I built something new, a life that wasn't chained to someone else's failures. A life where my name was mine, my credit was mine, my peace was mine. The final break came not with a scream, but with silence. 3 months after the dealership, after the fraud alerts and the cease and desist letters, and the endless cycle of threats and guilt, my phone simply stopped buzzing. No more calls, no more accusations, no more relatives sliding into my inbox to tell me what a disgrace I was. For a while, the quiet felt unnatural, like waiting for a storm that never arrived. But then something remarkable happened. I realized the storm had passed, and I was still standing. My brother's life unraveled in slow motion. Word spread that probation wasn't treating him kindly. Community service had stripped away the last shred of entitlement he wore like armor. He had to scrub graffiti off walls and pick up trash in the same neighborhoods he used to drive through with his music blasting. The smug grin I once saw on his face had turned into bitterness, but for once, it wasn't my problem to solve. He tried reaching out once, a text at 2 a.m. that said, "You could have saved me." I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it without reply, because I finally understood. I had saved someone. Myself. My parents clung to their pride as tightly as they could, but even pride cracks when the story no longer holds. The community they cared so much about now knew the truth. Their golden boy had fallen, and the daughter they had dismissed as selfish had been the only one strong enough to stand up to them all. When I ran into my mother at the grocery store months later, she pretended not to see me. She looked smaller, older, weighed down by secrets she could no longer spin. And I, for the first time in my life, walked past her without shrinking, my head high, my chest steady. Because I didn't need her recognition anymore. I had learned to give it to myself. Life after them wasn't easy, but it was mine. I moved into a new apartment with tall windows that let the sun pour in every morning. I took trips I had put off for years because I had always been saving for someone else's crisis. I went back to school part-time, paying for every class in cash, my name clean and untangled. Nights that used to be filled with panic and unpaid bills were now filled with quiet dinners. Laughter with friends who knew me as more than a fixer. Walks in the evening air where I could breathe deeply without waiting for another demand to crash down. And most of all, I learned the simplest, hardest truth of all. Family is not the people who bleed you dry and call it love. Family is not obligation wrapped in chains of guilt. Family is the life you choose, the boundaries you build, the people who respect them. I am not my brother's keeper. I am not my father's shield. I am not my mother's excuse. I am myself, strong, free, and no longer for sale. So when people ask if I regret it, if I went too far involving lawyers and police, I only smile and say, no. I finally went far enough. Because walking away wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. And if anyone listening has ever been told you owe your life to people who only take, remember this. You don't. You never did. Your name, your future, your peace, it's yours. Protect it. That was the lesson I learned in a dealership under the buzz of fluorescent lights, with a pen pressed into my hand. I didn't sign that day. Instead, I signed something far greater. My freedom. Tell me, did I go too far or not nearly far enough?